I'm Catherine Sheeran, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. My guest today hails originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but now makes her home in Ocala, Florida. Jenna Friedman-Lopez has been riding at the Grand Prix level for more than 10 years. She's the youngest rider to have ever qualified for the Great American $1 Million Grand Prix series. She is the owner and operator of Oak Ridge Farm, along with her husband, Tyler Lopez. She most recently represented Israel at a competition in Maltov in 2025, riding for the Nations Cup. Jenna, welcome to the show.
Hi.
I always like to lead with, how did you come to the sport? How did it become your passion? What were your early years like?
First off, thank you for having me. And so when I was younger, I want to say I was about 4 years old, we were living in Atlanta. We were really living in Woodstock, which is in Atlanta. And my sister was a baby and my mom was cleaning the house. She's kind of a clean freak. And I guess my sister and I were creating havoc. And she was like, Lance, that's my father's name. Take one of the kids and just go somewhere. I need them out of the house. I gotta clean. So my dad, I'm a daddy's girl, and he picked me up, put me in the car, and we just went on a drive. And we passed by, I think it was like a lesson pony. Like they had like a little sign that just said lessons and ponies. And so obviously my eyes lit up and he goes, let's go. And fun fact about that, or funny story, I was teeny tiny as a young kid. And when my father plopped me out of the car and said, I want you to teach my kid pony lesson or teach my kid how to ride ponies, they looked at me and they said, she's too small. And he goes, no, you don't know my Jenna. You got to put her on a pony. And from there on, it just kind of took off. And shortly after, we purchased a pony. His name was JJ. Also, his USF name was Connect the Dots. He was a little pony, the Americas. He was incredible. My sister and I shared him. We leased him out to multiple trainers around the Atlanta area. He was kind of a legend. Everyone knew him, taught me all the basics. He was awesome. Went to pony finals with him. So it's kind of, I would say he's to thank for, I mean, I already kind of had the bug, but he like really made me love it more. And he wasn't the easiest pony. He made me work hard. So he made me appreciate it more as well. So that's kind of, I would say, my start. It was a little random, but I'm so grateful that my mom wanted us out of the house that day to clean the house, because who would have known, right?
No kidding. How did your journey move from there, from the ponies and getting the bug for, jumpers and just training in general?
So we started out, my first barn ever was with Sharon Entine. She was also in Woodstock, Georgia. And I started with her and then went to another trainer when I was ready for that next step up. Her name was Julie Moore. And then we kind of started to see that I was progressing, and the trainers in Atlanta are amazing for what I wanted to do. It was a little bit more out of state. So I started riding with Daniel Geithner a little bit, and then we came down to Florida, and we kind of just started to realize there was a lot more to this world than just in Atlanta. And so I spent my seasons down here in Ocala when it was just primarily hits, and I would do online, and I was a part of a very small private school. It was 3 days a week. It was primarily online, and then obviously the 3 days in class, but they were very flexible with my schedule. I want to say I started the jumpers. I want to say I was training with Holly Adams at the time, and my first jumper was a pony jumper. Her name was Hocus Pocus. And that's when the pony jumpers were very popular. I'm very happy to see that they are starting to make a comeback. I think it's very important that kids nowadays get that basic, and it's great for the hunters, but also to learn how to really ride and get that edge in the jumpers. And I think it's incredible that they're starting to bring that back now in the States. So I want to say my jumper bug started with the pony, Hocus Pocus. She was amazing. From there, we leased a friend of ours' horse. I did the children's jumpers with him. His name was Tigre Royale. He was an absolute legend. I mean, he was he was perfect, but you go in the ring, if I jump clear, there was no beating us. And he won with his owner, Amber Hunter. He won with people before that. I mean, he just was incredible. And so obviously from there on, I had a hunter, and I love the hunters. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very important for our sport, but I was always a jumper girl.
I'm with you on that one. Love the
Yeah.
hunters, feel like you can learn a lot from them, but I just feel like the fact that with the jumpers, it's either you win or you don't. There's no
Yeah.
politics. There's no second guessing. Completely agree with you on that. I'm curious because you started quite young and you're still quite young, but you're running your own business. At what point would you say that you knew this is the world I want to be in? I'm not going to pursue studies. I'm really just going to pursue the passion of the horses.
I want to say, I mean, I always kind of knew deep down, no matter what I did academically, horses were always going to be in my life. I eat, sleep, breathe, poop horses primarily. And I was always that weird horse girl in school. And I missed all the functions in school because I was always horse showing. And I'd much rather be with my horse than go to those functions, to be totally honest with you. But I want to say the decision to do this professionally and as a living, I was probably 18 years old. I had graduated high school and my parents had made the decision to make the move down to Ocala. We bought a farm here. And at that point, I had taken a gap year. I was actually planning to go to UF because I really did like the academics and I did very well in school. And it's kind of funny. I wanted to have my major if I was going to go to school, be in like law. So it's funny that, I mean, I just always had an interest in that when I was in school. But I want to say towards the middle end of my gap year, my father came to me and he goes, listen, Jenna, you've got a Grand Prix horse, you've got 3 young horses, your sister has horses, you're starting to accumulate a lot more young horses. What do you want to do? We have a farm. I know you love this. You work hard, you're motivated, you have a serious passion for this. What would you prefer? Would you prefer that we enroll you for these classes here? Or would you choose to start this as a business and become professional and start to make a living out of what you love doing? And he did say to me, he goes, I know it's going to be the harder path if you pick the horse path because it's going to cost me more money helping you. But at the end of the day, you're going to be happier. And obviously, I said, twist my arm. I'm going to stick with the horses.
What lovely support to come from your family.
Oh, they're incredible.
I also think it's such a smart path because, to your father's point, it is more difficult to do this road for sure. But yet, following your heart, I feel like in the old days, there was a book that I remember reading. I think it was called If You Do What You Love, the Money Will Follow. I think a lot of people have gotten sort of off that track. So I just really admire you having chosen this as your destiny, but also your parents for really supporting you 100% behind the scenes. How many years ago was that?
So I'm 30 now. So I was about, I want to say 18, 19 years old, roughly. Oh man, I'm bad with mental math.
No, 12 years. That would be the number then.
Yeah.
You've been at this for a while. And I love that in this day and age when a lot of young people are coming up through the ranks and really are trying to do it quickly, you've taken your time. I mean, 12 years is a lot of time to put in. And you also, from just having tried to schedule with you for our meeting, I know how much you're juggling. And I think that's really admirable because, again, it talks or speaks to your work ethic, which I think is such a big deal in the riding world. I mean, any of the top trainers I've ever spoken with, they've all put in long, hard hours and they continue to put in long, hard hours. It doesn't ever get any easier. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, to that note, horses don't know holidays, days off, if you're sick, if you're not feeling well. Horses rely on us. So it's so worth the 5 a.m. wake ups to the 10 o'clock finishes. Or, I mean, I wouldn't, to be totally honest, it's an absolute dream to be able to do what we do and to be able to even work with horses, especially at this level. And I mean, it's incredible, really. I have a great life.
Talk to me a little bit about who has inspired you along the way. I know you mentioned a couple of your trainers. Is there anybody out there that you've watched? I mean, for me, BZ Madden comes to mind as one of my inspirations, as I'm sure for most women. But I'm just wondering, is there anybody that you felt like I'm trying to emulate a little bit of their ride while still keeping my own personal characteristics?
There's definitely, obviously, in our sport, it's a very technical, difficult sport. And there's a lot of people that I admire, look up to, try to. Obviously, my riding style is going to be different than your riding style, or vice versa, or anyone for that matter. But BZ Madden, for sure. She's a legend. She's incredible. She's exceptional. Laura Kraut, another strong lady rider. I love Ken Farrington. I love how impenetrable he is. He just game face, and especially when he had his bad accident a few years ago and he worked so hard to work his way back up. I mean, look at him now. He's incredible. Obviously I don't ride anything like him, but I really respect those. And those are just a few riders. Obviously, there's a million incredible riders in our sport. But someone who is really, really important in my career right now, and I hope for many, many years to come, a very important person to me, is Luis Sabino Gonçalves. He is my mentor. He is a very close friend of mine. He's like a father figure to me. I know I ride nothing like him, but what he has taught me and the time he's taken to teach me what he's taught me and the patience he's had with me, he's an incredible role model, really.
And how did that relationship develop?
We were down in Wellington. I want to say it was post winter season 2023. And I had my old Grand Prix horse, Kleiner Heiner, at the time, and big 18-hand boy. He's adorable, a big fluffy guy. But I really was struggling to better understand him. And my husband and I, at that point, it was just him and I. And my husband is absolutely exceptional on the ground. He is so knowledgeable. But he even said to me, there's some knowledge I'm not privy to. We need to find someone else that can also help you, because there's only so much I can do, and maybe bringing a new mindset in might change a little bit of the factors. And if you tweak a couple of things, it might be a different outcome. So when we were down there, we had noticed Luis was down there, and he won the qualifier on his mare, Vic, who incredible. The two of them, I mean, I'm sure you've seen plenty of the Saturday nights. They've podiumed and absolutely incredible. That mare is a legend already. I mean, I think he was like top 3 in both weeks of the 3 stars there. And Tyler was like, I think we should ask him, because he looks like he knows what he's doing. He looks like he has a really good, proper flat regimen when he prepares his horses. And he's in Ocala, because obviously we also had to look at the factor of the level that I wanted to compete at. At that time, there were not a lot of huge names in Ocala that really, I think, I would have benefited from. And I don't mean to say that in a harsh way. There is a huge, vast variety of incredible riders here, incredible professionals here. But to work with my riding and for me to be able to mesh well at that time in my life, we didn't really see anyone that I think we would have meshed well with. And so we messaged Luis, and he was like, okay, I'm happy to work with you. He goes, when I come back from Wellington, I'll meet you at your farm and we'll start working together. So first session, oh my gosh, first session, he comes out to my farm, and I'm on Tiny. He's my old horse, Kleiner Heiner, who's 18 hands. His name is Tiny. And I was on Tiny, and we're walking, and he's telling me to do X, Y, and Z and get my horse on my leg. And I felt so debilitated. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. We spent almost 2 hours at the walk. Wow. Walk transitions, walk. And then he goes, okay, let's do this. It was like a long session. And then afterward, he goes, okay, I see you tomorrow. And then he comes back tomorrow. And then I ended up going to a horse show, and he went to Europe for a couple of weeks. And then we reconvened. And then right after that, we just went straight into it. And he's really like, how he says things, he's so knowledgeable. And he opened my mind to really understanding the importance of like proper dressage work, not just, okay, inside leg, outside rein. There's so much more that goes into it, and better understanding your horse, and your horse being able to better understand you, and to have a better relationship so you have more success in the ring. So that's essentially how our relationship started. And I just think it's so funny, because that horse show was not a great horse show for me. And he called me and he goes, yeah, I was watching you. You were jumping clear until you weren't. And I said, yeah, yeah. But I just remember that first session. And I remember saying to myself, how am I jumping in Grand Prix right now if I can't even walk my horse properly? It was like it opened my mind to a lot.
So fascinating. A couple of things that you touched on. One was just, I think, the fact that you and your husband set your ego aside to bring in somebody else just because you felt like you needed a third set of eyes on your training. I think that speaks volumes about your characters. But I also love the way that you just said, just the chemistry that has to be there with a trainer. And to your point, there's lots of good trainers in Ocala, but if you're not feeling that their approach or something about their style isn't really speaking to you, then it is kind of wasted on you. So I think that's fabulous that you managed to find this connection. And then I also loved that going back to the fundamentals, all of a sudden now you feel like you can't ride. So how long did it take you to transition from now what he was teaching you on the flat to bringing that into the ring? Because that is a tall order.
It is. I will say I'm still working on it. If you ask Luis, he'd say, she's getting there. When I get it, he goes, finally. No, but all honesty, I want to say it was also hard because he wasn't changing my riding, but he was changing a lot of little things, which in turn was not changing the style of my riding, but changing how I rode that horse specifically. So I want to say we did the whole summer going into winter. I want to say it took like a few months, and it was also hard because I was jumping in the Grand Prix with this horse and jumping at that level, and also changing, not being secure with yourself, but you're also changing things that you're not super sure of. So sometimes the translation can get lost a little bit with you and your horse. I remember it was a welcome or a qualifier here, and it was early in the morning. It was summertime. I think it was summer of 2024. I'm sorry, it was summer of 2023, because I started working with Luis winter of 2022, the end of it. So that makes sense. And or I don't, my time, it's been so long now. It's 2022, 2023. Anyways, yes, I'm sorry. It was 2022. I'm so sorry. So anyways, doesn't really matter. It was a qualifier here. And I remember I went into the ring and I implemented everything. I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, it looked like an equitation round. And I look up, I jump a clear round over the fences. Let me just add that in. I look up and I had like 14 time faults. 14 time faults. I was clear over the fences, 14 time faults. I come out of the ring and Luis goes, why? And I said, and he goes, no, it's fine. You're good, but we need to work on, now that you're understanding, you need to move. And I'm like, no, I understand. So I think that was really what I struggled with most, was implementing those little things, but also keeping it moving for time. So I struggled with time faults for, I want to say, a couple of months, and then finally it got much better. I still am working on, new things. Luis will come out, teach me a new thing, and then one thing about me is if you teach me something, I will do whatever I can, practice, because you need to do that at home. You're not going to change anything at the horse show. And I do it until it feels normal. And so that's something I think that also speaks, not to sound cocky, but speaks on my character. I'm a very motivated person. I really want to make sure I succeed and excel, and I don't mind putting that work in and failing until I succeed.
Yes, to your point, I was wondering, do you find it challenging nowadays? Because when I've had this conversation with a lot of riders, there's so many horse shows nowadays. It's become such a big business that it's hard to find time to not be at a horse show and, to your point, implement these small changes and work at them. How do you strike that balance?
I mean, with us having HITS Ocala and the World Equestrian Center literally in our backyard, and I mean, it's a luxury that we have two major horse shows in this one area. I think it's great for, just a side note, not to go off the question, it's great for young horses to go back and forth. It's great for the exposure for the horses, for the riders, learning, moving up. But I think that's where you have to have a good team to really come together and make a good plan, because you kind of get lost in the sauce here a little bit, right? Like, you have 12 or 14 weeks a season at both venues. how do you find that time to say, okay, this week we need to take a breath. These horses cannot keep going, going, going. And I think that's also where, I guess, to answer your question, it comes into your management with your team and with your horses. And obviously, we make a plan before we start a season. It's horses. Anything can happen. My plan that I had for this season literally changed the first week of season. And that's fine, but you learn to adapt, right? But then you have to find those weeks where, okay, they need to get this rest week. And that rest week, you can't go and pound on the horse that just went and jumped 2 weeks in a row, but you can still work and finesse and work on those little things that you've been learning, right? I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, but I guess essentially it all kind of comes down to the management of you and your team and your horses and what horses you have and what level those horses are at. If you have a youngster, like we have a 5-year-old that is a very, very green 5-year-old, and he has not shown yet, but we've done a bunch of ticketing and we keep him at home. We bring him here. He spent a couple of nights here just so he has that exposure of this kind of environment. Bring him to the ticketing. And then once he feels like he's taking a deep breath, we pick a week that he shows. Like he's going to actually show next week because also this cold, I love the cold, but I don't like this kind of cold. I don't think it's really friendly for the young horses either. You're kind of setting yourself up for failure. You want them to be relaxed, not tense and, shaking from the cold and fresh. And you want to get the best experience possible, especially with it being a brand new horse show for them. But really, it's just essentially management of your team and your horses. I don't personally like to show more than 2 weeks in a row. I like to try to start out with a couple weeks on, week off, couple weeks on, week off. And once we hit that middle mark, we do week on, week off, week on, and kind of depends on, for me in FEI, wanting to do the ranking classes, I also have to look at what weeks are going to be more beneficial for me to really learn to be a little bit more competitive and try to build my ranking a little bit as well.
Tell me a little bit about your first experience riding for Israel in the Nations Cup, and that was in Martoft.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, where is Martofte?
It's in Denmark. It was in like the cutest little town in Denmark.
Oh, how adorable. That had to be a really big deal. Walk me back to how you were chosen, how it was all approached, who the rest of your team was, and what the experience was like for you. From what I saw in videos, it looked like it was a really positive experience all around.
It was the most invaluable, exceptional, incredible experience, especially as my first Nations Cup representing Israel, which was obviously very important to me, a huge goal of mine. And I'm really glad that I was able to be a part of that. So leading up to getting asked to be on the team last winter, I had really focused on trying to build my ranking, getting a little bit more competitive in the 145, 150 classes with my mare Valeska. And originally my plan was I really wanted to try to be a contender for the Nations Cup here in Wellington. And that all went to hell in a handbasket, and it just wasn't, the weeks leading up to it were not great. Obviously, as the sport goes, rails come down, that's the sport. So instead of letting that defeat me, I really was like, okay, I need to focus on being competitive, putting myself in the right situations, building my ranking. And obviously I did not make that team in Wellington and to be totally honest, I'm really glad I wasn't picked because I was not ready, and it was massive and it would have been way over mine and Valeska's head. And okay, that's why we have Hans Horn as our chef to keep. He is brilliant also, and I'll get into that. He's incredible, an absolute legend. So after the winter season, leading into the 2 spring shows, I had gotten a message from our team manager, Amichai, and he had asked if I would like to come to Europe and compete in the EEF Nations Cup Series. And obviously I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. But the one little thing was I, at the time, had about 30 horses and clients that I had really built up to, keep building my business. And I was only going to go over with one horse. So if you look at the big picture financially, it's kind of, it was a hard decision, but my clients were so incredibly supportive, and I was able, I have a couple of really good friends that were really helpful, came and helped ride my horses that I left at home, trained my clients. I mean, it really was incredible that the support system I had to be able to go and do this. I mean, I have great people in my life. So fast forward, getting to go to Europe. This was also my first time ever competing in Europe as well. So I obviously had traveled around Europe a little bit. My husband's from Ireland and he has family there, but I'd never gone even to trial horses in Europe. Like we'd always bought off videos. So this was like my first time really going and like riding in Europe, competing in Europe. So the First Nations Cup in Martofte, Denmark, incredible facility, by the way. Studer Iask owns it. They're the family, I believe, that owns Lego. It was beautiful. The weather was hit or miss. It was very cold. I did not pack for that kind of weather. And I just remember like, okay, I did the opening round. And I think that was at that point, the team was not picked on the order of how the team was going to go, like start rider, 2 middle riders, anchor rider. We were fortunate enough to have our anchor rider, Robin Muir. He was on our Olympic team. He's incredible. He's so seasoned. He's exceptional, very talented. So it was really comforting to know that we had like a seasoned rider on our team. And then aside from me, it was Natalie Leibovitz and Vanessa Hood. And it was both, I think Natalie had jumped in a couple of Nations Cups. I think she did the one in Wellington, but it was mine and Vanessa's first time ever competing on a Nations Cup. So it was a pretty green team. And I get so excited about it because it just was the most incredible experience. We did the opening round and then Hans, our chef de keep, was like, okay, where do you feel comfortable going? And I was like, I love going in the beginning of a class, but if I have to go in the middle end, I'm okay. I said, whatever you feel is fit, like is suited, I'm okay. Wherever you want to put me, I will be up to par and I will try my hardest. So he ended up putting me as rider number 1, which obviously in the back of my head, I was like, okay, it's not as much pressure as the anchor rider, but it's still a very important part because you are starting the precedence of the team. So... And the last time Hans had seen me ride, I had quite a few time faults because I was still in my time fault era. Sometimes I still have time faults. I would love to say I'm out of my time fault era, but it's always going to creep up behind me. But last week I learned to be a little bit more competitive and quick, and that was really fun. So anyway, sorry, goldfish moment there. So leading up to the actual Nations Cup, obviously I've worked very hard over the years to keep my mental state at bay. I mean, this is a very tough sport that we're in. It's a huge mental game. I really compare it a lot to golf. Funny enough, my sports psychologist, Dr. Bob Rotella, he wrote the book, How Champions Think. He's got a few other books, and he works with Rory McIlroy, and he worked with Tiger Woods, and he's a big golf guy. And I love his ideology. So he was always the basis and like my formula for how I was able to kind of get in my zen before these big classes, especially when I felt most nervous. So I remember leading up to it, Hans came up to me, our chef de keep, and he goes, listen, obviously we don't want rails, but if you have a rail, keep riding like you're jumping a clear. He said, do not worry about it. You keep riding like you're jumping a clear. Ride for the championship. My mentor, Luis, called me because I texted him. I said, I'm really nervous. And he called me and he goes, listen, same thing that Hans said, like verbatim. Ride like you're jumping a clear. It doesn't matter if you've had 1 or 2. Keep riding for that clear. Keep fighting for it. And I was like, okay, it's kind of sick to say, but that gave me so much more confidence. Having the pressure of jumping a clear round gave me more confidence. And it was incredible. When I went in the ring, I felt relaxed, calm, like just so at ease. And I had a first great round. I had a foot in the water and I think I tipped. It's kind of my kryptonite. It was a moving 6 stride to a tall vertical into a double, wide oxer out. And for me and Valeska, that's kind of our kryptonite because she gets a bit long in her back and she kind of drops her wither a little bit. And I got it done late and I kind of moved. And when I went to take a feel, I kind of blocked her with my hand instead of just getting her, like sitting into her and like really getting her back around to rock back. So I had A of that double. But I fought through everything because I was the beginning of the track, fought through, everything was super. And then, the team follows. Of course, Robin jumped an incredible clear. So that was really cool. And then for the second round, it was what I really liked about jumping in a Nations Cup, aside from that pressure. I sound like a psycho. I loved that pressure. But it's also, I really feel I think this is what a lot of riders, myself, struggle with. it's so healthy to have that pressure, right? But not turning it into a negative pressure and overthinking and doubting and having all these high expectations. Because when you have that and you're like, well, I expect this, I expect that, you kind of put yourself in a bad situation subconsciously. And you don't want your subconscious to be there. You want your subconscious to be clear and positive. So, but what I really liked about the Nations Cup is you learn from your first round and you can fix that mistake. And I did. And I went in and I fixed my mistake and came out, and Hans said, I'm proud of you. And I was like, oh my gosh, hearing him say he's proud of me, like fangirl moment. I sound like such a child, but like, holy crap, it was incredible. So of course that gave me eons more confidence, and we did great. Then we went on to Drammen, and at that point, Valeska was not feeling so great in her body. She was a little bit stiff, we used the Steffex van, and we traveled all the way from Denmark and went all the way to Norway. And that's a far travel to be in a Steffex van. And she gets a bit stiff and tense. And when she gets that way, it's very hard for her to use her body properly. So it was a learning curve in Drammen. I was the leading rider again. And this time it was the same exact team, but our anchor rider was Theodore Boris, who he was a debutante too. That's what we call it for being on a Nations Cup. It was his first time. And he handled that pressure so incredible. He went and jumped 2 clear rounds, one time fell in one of them, and like really held our team together. I had a rail. I had 2 down the first round, and I had a foot in the water the second time. And obviously I was a little disappointed, but I was able to fix my mistakes and keep moving on, especially with the circumstances, knowing horses are not machines. So even though Val felt exceptional in Martofte, she might not feel great. She might have been pent up and a little bit stiff, and the weather was way different and more cold, and she was a little bit more spooky. And I mean, there's a million factors, right? Horses are just like people. They wake up and don't feel great one day, or they might be feeling a certain way. But the one thing I will say is that mare always fights for me. And even if she wasn't feeling 100%, she still gave me her all. And that's something that you can't take that away. So it really, overall, being able to compete and tour around Europe and being able to do that gave me even more confidence coming back home to teach my clients, to ride my other horses, to continue on with Valeska, and being able to represent Israel, especially when we were overseas. Denmark, they were very, really, really kind to us. I didn't feel like I was ever in a bad spot representing and wearing my Israeli flag. But in Norway, we had to be very careful, and we had to leave all of our Israeli gear at the horse show. We were not allowed to leave the hotel with an Israeli flag on us.
Wow.
We had bodyguards there. So it's obviously, that's the upsetting part of things, but we didn't let it get to us because Israel's strong, and it doesn't matter what's happening. Israel always prevails. So I think that's obviously my opinion on that. I know people have their own opinions, but that's what I believe, and I'm proud to represent Israel. So it was an incredible feeling being able to do that and wave our flag, and especially overseas, especially in those times.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I really did want to touch upon what Israel has gone through in the last few years. And I think we spoke off camera about, just in horse show world, we live in a bit of a bubble. And so you're not aware of necessarily what's going on. I'm saddened to think that, yes, that was your experience in Denmark, that you had to hide who you were, but also
in Norway. Denmark was great.
Sorry, that was in Norway. My apologies. So I'm sorry that you had to hide it there, but I'm also proud to hear you speak up for your country and your beliefs. And it sounds like it was an amazing moment. And I do agree with you that Israel is very strong and it will prevail. And so just lovely that you were able to represent that nation while they were going through so much. And I also wanted to touch on when you said you were the lead rider, because I spoke with McLean Ward a few months ago, and he's almost always the last rider. And he said he hates that position. His favorite ride position is to be the first. So I think that's kind of cool that that's where you were, because I do think it's a very important position, because you do lead off the team and you kind of set the tone for everybody. So the fact that you got to do that in both competitions, I think speaks to how the chef d'équipe felt about you in terms of your strength of just no fear, and the fact that you had a very confident approach. And I also did want to ask you a little bit more about working with somebody who's helping you with the psychological side, because I think not all riders admit that there is such a high pressure to riding,
yeah.
and that you can't always do it on your own. I would say the more you talk, the more I can see how that has helped you. And how many years have you been working with a sports psychologist?
So it's actually funny. Years ago, I worked with Margie Sugarman, and she is incredible. And then I went through a bit of a bad rut with one of my old retired Grand Prix horses. And I mean, I know you know this just as well as anybody does. When you're in a bad place and some things are happening, and let's say you're getting eliminated, or like and you're in the middle of a season, especially like, okay, like we're at WEC right now. It's very hard to get out of that funk. And horses are mirrors of us. They are very intuitive, but they also don't remember if you don't let them remember. But at this point, I wanted it so bad. I want to say maybe 17 years old. And I was on my old Grand Prix horse. His name is Adoctro, born named Jaws. He's awesome. He's my soulmate. He lives out in the field now, happy and fat and living his best life. This is when Hits was only here. WEC wasn't even built yet. And they only had the Sunday Hits Grand Prix. And at that point, I was jumping double clear, top three, top three, top three. Obviously, you have a lot of eyes on you. I was young. I was like 15, I want to say 15, 16 years old, actually. And all of a sudden, it just you went from a hero to zero like that. That's the one thing with this sport. It is so humbling because you can go from hero to zero with the snap of a finger. And at that point in my life, okay, I was young. I was 15, 16 years old, and I wanted so bad. And I put so much pressure on myself, and I overthought everything. And I just always was worried that I let my horse see that I was still nervous. So I started going in the ring, and I'd have elimination. Next week, elimination. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, everyone wanted me to fail. And I got into that mindset. And then I was told to read Bob Rotella's, or I call him Doc, and most of us do that work with him call him Doc. Doc's book, How Champions Think. I read that book. That book became my Bible. And I learned your subconscious is so powerful. And you have to, whether it's your mantras, or you learn how to meditate, or your daily affirmations, you have to teach your subconscious that it's only positive thinking. Because when you're in the ring, if you're thinking consciously, your subconscious stops working, and then you get into you always want your subconscious to be able to be in a positive frame of mind. And essentially what I learned from reading that book over and over and over and over and over again, I probably read it like 10 times, listened to the audio book of it a million times. That used to be my prep before a Grand Prix. I'd listen to the audiobook. You need to think that you are the best. It doesn't matter if, and McLean Ward is incredible, but it doesn't matter if McLean Ward's in my class. I'm going to think I'm the best. I'm going to think I'm better than him because he's thinking he's the best. You know what I mean? He's not looking at me saying, oh, she's better than me, and then making himself feel worse. That's what sets riders like McLean Ward and Ken Farrington and BZ Madden and Laura Kraut apart from other people, right? They think they're the best. So I started to learn that, okay, and it's also being humble in your everyday life. I'm not going to walk around and say, I'm the best. But when you're on your horse's back, you say you're the best. It does not matter what anyone, and that was the other thing I had to learn as well. It does not matter what anyone else is doing. If people are talking about you, it's because you're doing something right. And so that was kind of my motivation. And over the years, at that point, I was not working with anyone, but I kind of was dabbling a little bit. Like I listened to some podcasts with Peter Crone and more like on mindfulness. And I started doing the Headspace app and like taught myself how to like meditate and get into like a still frame of mind, and how to like get into that mindset when I'm walking down the ramp or entering the arena, and how my breathing needs to be. And so I did a lot of research, kind of saw and felt what fit me more. So I have my own little quirky things I do before I jump in a Grand Prix. I recently, actually after competing in Europe, one of my teammates, Vanessa Hood, we were talking, and she was like, I love your perspective on mindset. And we were kind of talking about it. And she was like, what kind of led you to these ideologies? And I said, Dr. Barbara would tell her, and she goes, oh my gosh, I've gotten to work with him before. And I was like, oh my gosh. I always said to myself, I would be so incredibly lucky if I ever got to have one conversation with him. She goes, here, call his wife, set up an appointment, and you can have your appointment with him and you can start working with him. So I did it right away. And since then I've been working with him. I'll speak with him maybe once a month, or if I'm like, there's been a couple of emergencies where I'm like, Doc, I need to call you. And he's been traveling from seminar to seminar, and he'll call me in between his flights. And it's so cool to be able to speak with him, because what he says makes sense. And the way he says it, it's like calming, and he's awesome. Like if I feel a little like not great and I'm not able to get myself out of it, I'm like, let me just call Doc real quick and see how we can work through this. And he reminds me that I'm the best. I need to believe I'm the best. I'm on the best horse. I'm an incredible rider. And again, just telling myself I'm the best. And I think it's in this sport, it is so incredibly hard. It is a huge mental game. As I said before, horses are mirrors of us. They're so intuitive, but they're also not, they don't remember that you jumped over a purple jump yesterday unless we let them remember, right? That's why I say they're mirrors of us. So if we are and nice, calm, cool, collected, confident, supportive, positive, the horses feel that. And I think that also goes a lot into the flat work that we do with our horses. And if you're implementing all these things and you have a positive, clear mind about it, the horses start to feel that. And I think that's where the success comes in.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just thinking it's actually really good timing, because I went through some stuff with my horse and had a couple of falls in the last 6 months. And I would say I carry the baggage all the time. And you're right. He doesn't remember that all these things are wrong. It's all in my brain. But he remembers when I remind him. So
Yep.
That's fascinating. I also love that somehow you managed to conjure up the psychologist of your dreams in real life.
Isn't that crazy?
If it wasn't fate, I don't know what is, because it absolutely just sounds like, yes, it was meant to happen.
I'm pretty blessed that I get to work with him, and I get to learn from him, and then I get to even learn from Luis, because Luis is also such an incredibly strong-minded person and positive and just an incredible role model. But to what you just said regarding you and your horse and baggage. So one thing, I tell it to my clients, I even say it to myself, and my husband has to remind me sometimes if I have a not great day and I get a little bit like, oh my gosh, that sucked. I have to remind myself, when you drive a car, which direction are you driving to get to your destination? You're driving forward, right? Mm-hmm. We only look in the rear view to see if there's anything behind us, and we keep moving. We don't drive to our destinations in reverse, right? So it's the same thing with the horses. Keep moving forward. If you continue moving, but move backwards and look backwards behind you, you're never going to get to your next destination. So it's the same thing with the horses, same thing with the bad incidents. Obviously, it's fight or flight mode, or, we don't want to fall off it. But I mean, we tempt fate every day, right? I mean, it's pretty incredible that we get to have these relationships with these 1,200-pound animals. But at the end of the day, if we ride worried about what happened back then, and we drive backwards and we look in our rear view while we're trying to drive and only focus on the rear view, we're going to get in an accident, right? So same thing with the horses. If you ride your horse backwards, worrying about the baggage, you're going to get into an accident instead of just riding and letting it go and just enjoy it. That's the other thing I actually wanted to say. And I'm sorry, I know I talk a lot, but I love horses. I love what I do. We spend so much time, so much money, so much energy, so much stress, so much everything. We spend, if you think about it, months, weeks, hours, years of preparation to go into the arena for maybe just over a minute. So if we want to really focalize it on that, we need to enjoy it, because it's a very short period of time that we're in the ring. And if we're going in worried, we're not enjoying it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, also something that is a bit lost on the horse industry. We don't have as much of that camaraderie anymore. It's all about money, and how much you spent on this one, or how much you're getting paid to do this, or that, or that, or that. And it's like, what happened to, we are all here because of one thing. We have all one thing in common, and it's the love of the horse. Let's put aside, obviously, we need to be able to make money to be able to continue doing this. It's not a cheap sport, but let's not forget why we're all here. And it's for the love of the horse. The competition is a plus. It's a luxury. I don't know if this helps you at all, but putting it all into perspective, just getting on and just take a deep breath. You work hard, you do this for fun, enjoy it.
No, thank you for that. That was lovely sentiment to share. Also, just wanted to ask you a little bit more about your Mount Valeska, because she is a pretty amazing mare from what I've observed. I did watch some of the videos, and I did see you were fifth, were you not, in the meter 45 Grand Prix last Sunday? And I love watching the two of you together because you're kind of fiery. That's how I would describe you. You're in motion, and that's why it's interesting to hear you say you had time faults, because it's hard to imagine that watching you on Sunday. It doesn't look like something that would happen. But tell me a little bit more about your journey. And
no, to answer your question about Valeska, she, first off, that mare, I admire the heck out of her. She's exceptional. If I am half of the athlete and just energy wise of the being that she is, by the time I'm 60, I will have lived a fulfilled life. She's just everything about her, what she embodies. She's just an incredible, incredible horse. She's an incredible partner. She's an incredible friend. She's an incredible competitor. She always, 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 it does not matter. She always gives me 150%, even if it's a little bit too much for her. She will always do it. She never lets me down. Her and I are kind of kindred spirits. Like, we love our snuggle time, but we also don't always want to be touched. And she's exactly like that. She's a chestnut mare. But no, I think we both share a love for one another, and I think we both share a love for competition. And I think that's why we make such a good match. But yes, I have had time faults on her. I just recently, like this past week, my husband and Luis were like, why don't you focus on trying to be competitive? Like, you know, you're great with Valeska at 145. Just go in and have fun and go for it. Like, don't worry about having a rail. You're still worried about protecting the jump. Like, just go be competitive. And I was like, okay, I'll try. And so that's essentially that was kind of my goal this week, was to be competitive. And I was fourth in the 145 3-star speed class on Wednesday last week. I was seventh in the winning round on Friday, and then we chose to do the national, not the Saturday night Grand Prix. And I think it was the right move. She's more than capable of jumping a 150. I did it all summer with her, but she's really competitive at a 145. And I think with the way the course designer was building this past week, it was Olaf Peterson Jr. He's a brilliant course designer, but I don't think that the Grand Prix track suited Valeska very well. So I think it was the right move. Also picking that class for her where she can remain confident and loving her job. And I could also remain confident in like learning to go a little bit more fast and a little bit more competitive and learning to do that together. Cause let's be realistic, I'm not the quickest rider, and I need to work on that.
Well, that's not been my observation, but you tell me your history is time fault, so I have to believe you.
I love that. That means I'm doing something right. I cannot wait to tell my husband that you said that, because he's going to be like, Jenna, you're not fast. Because the week before in the 2-star, I thought I was guns blazing, and I look up and I'm like 10 seconds slower than the leading time, and I was just lucky enough to slip into 12th. And I look back at the video and I'm like, wow, I really wasn't moving. So at least we had some good, at least I was able to progress within a week. And last week I fooled you and you thought I was a fast rider.
Just before we wrap up, I would love to ask you, what are your dreams in the next year and for the next 4 years? I'm guessing that Olympics are on your bucket list, riding for Israel, and I'm hoping that's a possibility because it's still 2 years off, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, obviously the Olympics is the coveted dream. I would be so privileged to be able to be a part of that team, especially representing Israel. I think that being really incredibly special, because we have such a We have a smallish group of riders, but they're all really supportive of one another. And I would be honored to be able to be a part of that team. So obviously that's the main goal. And that's kind of what our building blocks are to get there. Within my next year, obviously, this is a pipe dream. I know it's maybe not the most realistic with where I'm at right now, but we've got the World Equestrian Games coming up at Aachen. So it's double whammy, being able to compete at WEG and also to be able to compete at Aachen. That's a bucket list right there. But right now, I just acquired a new mount. Tomorrow will be my show debut with him.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited, and I am really, really, really excited about him. He is exceptional. He's talented. He is a little bit more on the green side, but he's 8 coming 9. But I feel so blessed that I have this opportunity to be his partner. I'm still pinching myself over it because he's really just one of the coolest horses I've ever got to sit on. But with that also in mind, this is going to be a bit of a building year for me. Obviously, it's always really healthy to have those high expectations and those high goals. And it's good to keep those up there, but we have that ladder we have to climb. So you've got obviously those high goals at the top of the ladder, but I've got all those rungs I have to climb. So I need to get to know this horse more. I obviously am going to continue trying to build my ranking with Valeska, learning to be more competitive and really just enjoying getting to go in the ring with her every day because it's such a privilege to even be able to ride Valeska. I've got a couple of cool young horses that we're going to keep producing that I'm really excited for their future. So I guess you would say my year goal is to really build on what I have right now, become a stronger, more competitive rider with both Valeska and my new horse. We're calling him Chonk right now. The jury's still out. The names can change. Valeska has about 10 different names. Tiny has about 10 different names. If you are a Friedman-Lopez horse, you will end up having about 10 names just because nicknames turn into this and that. So as of right now, he's Chonk. But with that being said, the goal is to really get a strong partnership with Chonk to keep building us up. Obviously, we see where we lead with that. That's kind of my goal right now, obviously, to continue building clientele. I have a really good group of girls right now, a good group of clients to continue building with my young horses, hopefully sell a couple because I'm also in the business of that. We've got a couple of really cool sale horses right now. So essentially, that's kind of, it feels a little bit small. Obviously, I'd love to go back to Europe. I know that that's also in the works, but it really just depends on where I'm at with my new mount and also what horses I have by the end of the season going into spring, summer. It would be an honor again to go represent Israel this summer. It's a very big summer. I would love to say I'd be ready to go jump at WEG, but I don't know if that is in the cards for me right now. That's just me not knocking myself down. That's just me being realistic, obviously. I know I have the horsepower to do it now, but I don't know if he's going to be ready for that by then. But we never say never, right? So my goals are a little bit open, but the primary goal is to strengthen my relationships, to become more competitive, and to just obviously have fun and enjoy. And obviously, long-term goal and long-term dream is to represent Israel at LA. That would be a dream come true. It would be an honor. And I think we can do it. I think Israel can do it, and I think we can do it. And I know I have a great support system, and I have the right people backing me, and I have the right horsepower. And I'm very excited to see what the next few years will hold leading up to, or next couple of years will hold leading up to that.
Well, I'm excited to see where you land as well. And I do have my fingers crossed and wishing you all the best success in getting to LA and representing Israel once again. And I do want to say thank you so much for your time and energy. It was really a pleasure speaking with you. And I know that our listeners will get a lot out of having had the privilege of hearing you today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome. And I also will say this is my first time ever doing like a podcast interview and speaking one-on-one, because I will tell you, disclaimer, I'm not very good in front of cameras. I don't know why. It's really unfortunate, but I think I didn't stutter much this time. And I appreciate your patience with my very long explanations. And I also appreciate you saying that I don't talk a lot, because I get told I talk a lot. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your interest in what we're doing. And I think this is really great that you have this and that you get to speak to such a variety of different riders. And I look forward to watching back more on who you speak with and learning more.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And just a shout out to our listeners in Virginia. I want to say thank you so much for the positive feedback. And I'm hearing you. And so we're going to bring on some people that you've recommended. And I also want to say a shout out to Belgium. I have a lot of new listeners because of Peter speaking with me a couple of months ago. So thanks, everybody. And please, if you enjoy the podcast, follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Horsetails with Cat. And please share with any of your friends that you think might enjoy it as well.